Hi everyone, welcome to THT, and today we are going to talk about how to counter Quinlan Red. So as you know, Quinlan Red is predicted by many to be one of the most popular and powerful deck in upcoming meta, even though that meta is going to be very wide open. There's going to be a wide variety of different decks, so you should probably not choose your deck only to take into account Quinlan, because there's going to be many other decks to worry about. But it is definitely a powerful deck that I think there's a lot of things you can do to improve your matchup, not only in the cards you play, the leader you choose, but also from the play pattern that you take. And we're going to explore all those things in this video. So just to let you know, this video is sponsored by Card Market, the biggest marketplace to buy and sell cards in Europe. So before we start here, just want to show you like a kind of a typical Quinlan list. This one is the one that won a showdown in Brussels, so I usually don't pay too much attention to the showdowns because they're such small tournaments, but I thought the list was quite good and quite representative of what you can expect whenever you're playing into Quinlan deck. And just so we are kind of on the based on what we're talking about. Obviously, there's going to be a wide variety of different decks. I don't even know if this is a very optimized version of the deck, but it seems to be fairly standard. And it's just, once again, kind of a talking point to kind of understand what we're talking about here. So first of all, Quinlan Red is a tempo aggro decks it's not purely tempo. It's kind of in between the mid-range deck and the tempo aggro tempo deck. The idea of the deck is to leverage the ping of Quinlan combined with Stargate Town to get himself a very early game advantage, and then just take over the game from that point with very efficient units that are able to control the board and put pressure on the opponent. And it's a deck that also heavily emphasizes on hand disruptions with a lot of discard, selected discard and regular discards that makes fourth throw even stronger, and some pretty strong top end to finish to take complete control of the game, like Plo Koons, Podam Rounds, and Han Solo. It also leveraged Quinlan, which is one of the best leaders in the game because it's a leader that has both excellent stats, 3 7s and combos on 5, but also has a very strong leader ability, specifically when he's deployed. So it's a really well-rounded deck, and it's a deck that I think it's one of these decks that is not easy to counter, simply because it's not specifically emphasizing on one specific playstyle, but it's a very well-rounded deck that can do a variety of different things. So there's no specific strategy that completely counters the deck. It's not a deck like, for example, like Palpatine, or like very extreme, or like a control decks, like we were talking about the Iden Red in one of my very first how to counter videos. It's a bit like Han Yellow in the sense that it's a deck that is very well rounded, that can kind of beat anything, and it's going to require a lot more subtle answers to be able to really play around properly. And this is what we're going to be exploring today. So first of all, I'll talk about the things that are bad ideas, the things that you shouldn't be doing whenever you're playing against Quinlan, and things you should be avoiding. The first one is to play first, especially if you're playing a slower deck. So one of the things that you're going to see with Quinlan is something that we are accustomed to do in Star Wars Limited, is to always play first and to take initiative. Whenever you're playing a Quinlan deck, it's not a good idea to do this because, very simple, if you are going to be playing a 2-drop, you play your 2 drops, then your opponent's turn, he plays the 2 drops, pings your 2 drops, use Stargate Town, and then suddenly you are starting at the game behind because now your opponent has a 2-drop and you don't have any 2 drops to start the game with. That's pretty bad. And this can be avoided simply by deciding to play second, so your opponents can play his unit first, and then you can play your unit, and it doesn't get pinged, and now he's going to need to play another 2-drop if he wants to be able to deal a ping your 2-drop, which means that he's going to have to be playing under curve, and you're still going to have the opportunity to attack with your 2-drops when that happens. Obviously, there are exceptions if you obviously have a deck that has a lot of units that can ignore the ping plus Stargate Town, so notably those 2/2 shielded unit like Crafty Smugglers or RC-37, or if you have a 2-drop that you are planning to open the game up with a 1-drop, and most versions of Quinlan don't play that many 1-drops, so if you're playing against a version of Quinlan that doesn't play many 1-drop, it's going to be hard for him to interact with those double 1-drop openings. Something though that does happen, and unfortunately if you're playing a deck that is going to be the aggressor, So if you're playing a deck that is more aggressive than Quinlan, I think to skip your turn 1 means that probably you're skipping your turn 1, and then your opponents take initiative, and then you decide to pass, and then your opponent decides to not play anything and takes the initiative, and then you basically skip your turn 1. Your opponent also did skip your turn 1, but that's pretty bad for you because whenever both players decide to pass and move on to the next turn, there's always advantages to slower decks, because the slower decks wants to slow down the game so then he can get to the late game and where he has the advantage. So obviously if you're playing an aggressive deck, you kind of still have to play a 2-drops on turn 1 and play first, and you're going to be forced to be playing first most of the time unless your opponent doesn't have anything, and you're probably going to have to lose your 2-drop. So in the best advice I can give is, if you're playing aggro, try to find openings that don't get blowouts by ping plus Talking Town. And if you're forcing the Talking Town, at least you force the Talking Town, it's not going to be available anymore. And however, if you're playing a slower deck, you are completely fine with your opponent going pass. If you're playing anything that if you think you have a better late game than Quinlan, going pass, no turn 1 play is completely valid. Also, please, if you do have the initiative, do not say take initiative. If you don't have any 2-drops to play, if you don't have any turn 1 play, instead of taking the initiative right away, just decide to pass. And then your opponent's most likely going to pass, and then we're going to be that pass situation. Your opponent's going to think that you're playing around the ping Talking Town, but in fact you just don't have any 2-drops. So it's also another advice I give is to basically don't simply just take initiative on turn 1 if you don't have any turn 1 play. So that's the first kind of like little interaction, which is a bit counterintuitive. It's kind of the same idea with Cad Bane. If you're playing a deck that is slower than Quinlan, don't play any turn 1 play unless your opponent has played a turn 1 play already. If you end up in a pass situation, it is advantageous for you as the slower deck, because you are effectively skipping the first turn, bringing yourself closer to the late game, and where when you're gonna have an advantage over the opponent. Then the second bad idea is obviously to play, which is linked to the first one, is to play a 2-drop that are vulnerable to ping plus Talking Town. Obviously, most 2-drops in the game will lose to ping plus Talking Town. That's unfortunate, but there's a couple of 2-drops that do not. So if you're playing, especially if you're playing an aggressive deck, having 2-drops that don't lose to Talking Town, ping plus Talking Town, is very, very nice. So we're going to talk about them in the video. Crafty Smugglers, L337s, things that have, like, once again, double 1-drop opening can be very useful, especially if those 1-drops don't have 1 health. So then if your opponent does ping Talking Town, if it goes ping Talking Town on a 1-drop, it's not nearly as bad as if it does it on a 2-drop, because you still have the other 1-drops to go alongside it, that kind of thing. We'll talk about a bit more in details, but try to have opening that are not vulnerable to playing plus Talking Town. Don't play a deck that relies on specific cards to win the game. Quinlan is known for having access to selective discard. They play in the main deck, they play Kira. In the sideboard and sometimes in the main deck, they also play Spark of Rebellion. And in the sideboard, they even sometimes play Jam Communication. So if you're playing a deck that really relies on the specific cards to win the game, that's a bad idea. So a good example for this, probably the best example for this, is probably the Rex Unity of Purpose deck. This deck is a combo deck that doesn't do well into Quinlan because it relies way too much on specific cards to work that can easily be discarded. Other bad idea is to play a slow deck that only focuses on trading 1-for-1. So if you're playing a slow deck, you're not going to be winning the game against a Quinlan if you're just trading 1-for-1, because one of the characteristics of the Quinlan deck is that most of the cards actually trade 2-for-1s. You get loads of cards that are able to produce card advantage. There are the smuggle cards that don't cost any cards, or there are cards like Ahsoka that basically discard when they come into play, that are very annoying. And those kind of so if you just focus on trading 1-for-1, what's going to happen is like you're going to be running out of cards, and your opponent is not going to run out of cards, and you're just going to lose the game. So you need to be focusing on card advantage. Star Wars Limited is not a game that is about value most of the time. It's a very tempo-focused game. But against Quinlan, you have to be very mindful of card advantage and the value you're producing, because if you don't have any cards in hand, you're obviously going to lose. and it can happen very easily against Quinlan because of the amount of hand disruption that the deck has. So you have to be very careful about this, and you have to be very mindful of the value of the card advantage training, getting 2 cards for 1 card. So card draw that allows you to draw multiple cards are very, very good. Removal that allow you to kill something and then put something on the board at the same time. Those kind of value trades, all this is very, very useful. If you are focusing on just trading 1 for 1, you're going to lose against Quinlan. That's mostly an advice for control deck, obviously. The other one is to play expensive upgrades. Quinlan players nowadays have a lot of disruption against upgrades. They play obviously the traditional Waylay, which is very annoying. They also play Fang Fighters, and they also play Bamboozle in their deck to get rid of all those upgrades. And they also sometimes even play a Podamron, which can obviously can remove discard upgrades with his ability. So all this makes it playing upgrades against expensive upgrades against Quinlan very difficult. So usually not a great idea to play expensive upgrade against Quinlan. Once again, it depends on the version. Some versions of the deck don't run as much upgrade disruption, but nowadays with the pilots being as popular as they are, most Quinlan deck will have a heavy amount of an anti-upgrade in their deck, I believe. Another one is to play expensive ground threats that have no immediate impact on the game, that have 7 HP or less. So this one is it's a very particular one, but actually englobes a very, very large amount of different cards. So those 7 HP is a very big breakpoint for Quinlan. If you're playing units that have more than 7 HP, there's no way the Quinlan players can deal with them in one hit, unless he uses Surprise Strike and he has a unit already in play. But let's say if he doesn't have a unit in play, or if the units plays are very small, there's no way he can kill something that has 8 HP. 7 HP is a different story, because he can go Han Solo plus the ping of Quinlan, which allows him to basically one-shot most of the leaders in the game. And he also can go with Plo Koon. Plo Koon with Coordinate turns on is 7 damage as well. So if you have a unit that has 8 health, so try to avoid playing units that have 7 HP, unless they have a very big impact on the game when they come out, and then you're okay trading for them. But generally speaking, the ground threats, 7 HP is not a safe spot to be. There's loads of ways for Quinlan to get rid of them, and it's usually are pretty big blowout that can lose you the game. Don't play, for example, unless the entering battlefield effect of Luke is very powerful. Don't just play a Luke on -3, -3 that doesn't have big impact, because the chance of this Luke surviving is going to be very low. There's just so many ways, especially if Coordinate is turned on. There's just so many ways for this to kill it, especially if Quinlan is still in play. So be very mindful of this. Be mindful that Quinlan has no problem getting rid of 7 HP ground units, generally speaking. So, good ideas. Things that are good against Quinlan. First of all, smuggle cards. Smuggle cards are great against Quinlan, because Quinlan is really big on hand disruptions and stripping you away from your cards. And obviously Smuggle is a great counter to this, because it allows you to play cards from your Smuggle that are basically safe from being discarded, and then you can be able to play after your hand is empty. And this can happen fairly often against Quinlan, where you basically end up in those top deck situations. Smuggle cards are amazing in those kind of top deck situations. So obviously Smuggle cards are great. Then play around Fourth Throw. Fourth Throw is one of the most powerful cards in Quinlan deck, but it's not so powerful if you know how to play around it. To play around it is very simple. Keep a cheap card in your hand, something that costs 2 or less. And the Fourth Throw, if the Fourth Throw only deals 2 damage, it's not that great of a card. So this is something that it's easy to forget, it's easy to get carried away, but playing against Fourth Throw deck requires very specific play patterns, when sometimes you want to usually you want to resource the 2 drops in your hand, because 2 drops are not so useful past the turn 1, and you would rather just keep more expensive cards in hand. If you're playing against Quinlan, keep a 2-drop into hand. It has utility to play around Fourth Throw, and you should be playing around Fourth Throw this way. So this is a very important factor. It doesn't require any changes into your deck. If you but it's something you have to keep in mind, especially if you're playing a lot of zero resource cards. You have like zero resource card like I forgot the name, like Medal Ceremony and stuff. Discarding a zero resource card onto 4th feels extremely good. That kind of thing. Reliable card draw. If you have a way to reliably draw cards, it's really, really good against Quinlan. So what difference do I make between reliable and non-reliable? For example, I would say something like a Death Mark is relatively reliable because it's relatively difficult for the opponent to deal with it unless he plays Fang Fighters. Basically, the only other way, like the Bamboozle doesn't really work. And then Poe, you can play around it because it's only on attack. But basically, a reliable way to draw card is very nice. For example, Pershing is not a reliable card draw because Pershing is so easy for Quinlan to kill. But having some sort of ways to draw card is very good. Once again, it makes 4th throw worth. It also makes discard worse in general. It allows you to counterplay the amount of hand disruption that your opponent is going to have. The more cards you have in the hand, the more difficult and the less impactful the hand disruption is going to be. So playing slower than Quinlan, but with a lot of ways to produce card advantage. So something that I think Quinlan is obviously a mid-range deck, so control decks counter mid-range deck naturally. Quinlan has some plays into control, not only with hand disruption, but if you are able to produce card advantage, then this advantage is not really longer a strength that it can rely on. So if you're playing a control deck, whether it's a soft control or hard control, or even a mid-range deck that is slightly slower than Quinlan, like an Anakin, having a lot of ways to produce card advantage and draw cards is very, very good. And that's, in my opinion, the best avenue to beat Quinlan. I think basically mid-range and control decks that have ability to draw a lot of cards are the best counter to Quinlan, in my opinion. And then play large late game threat, especially in space, is another great idea against Quinlan. Quinlan does not have access to real removal. The best thing he's gonna have is Waylay. So if you play something like an Avenger, like something in space, there's not much that Quinlan can do about it. He's basically hoping to win the game before that happens. So I would say that a deck like Piet, I think, is gonna be able to play those late game threats super early in the game. This can be very problematic for Quinlan because Quinlan, most of his removals are simply just ambush cards. So basically, we're talking about Han Solo. We're talking about Plo Koon. They only deal with ground. They don't deal with space. In space, the best thing he's gonna have is basically maybe he's gonna have the Falcon whenever he plays it from hand, or the Smuggle Falcon. He's not even always playing it. Or he's gonna have Waylay. That's about it. So that's something that can be really, really effective. Now let's talk about the leaders that I think are pretty good into Quinlan. Honestly, it's really not. I'm not talking about the decks here. I'm just specifically talking about the leaders themselves. And a leader that I really like into Quinlan is Obi-Wan Kenobi. What is really powerful into Quinlan with Obi-Wan is obviously his leader ability, which is a great counter to Quinlan's ability because it pings you something, but you can heal it immediately, preventing it from using Tarkin Town and preventing him from capitalizing on the extra damage. So Quinlan can still be annoying if he goes like Quinlan ping plus ambush, then you don't have any timing window to heal in that case. But more often than not, you're gonna have timing windows to heal up your units and prevent them from using Tarkin Town, and that's really, really effective. Then the units itself, then it's a 4/7. You still get sniped. You're still gonna be able to get sniped by what's it called? By Han Solo. So Han Solo plus ping if Quinlan is deployed. But if Quinlan is not deployed, if you manage to kill Quinlan earlier and then deploy Obi-Wan Kenobi, then suddenly there's no way for the opponent to one-shot you because then the cost has to be exactly the same. And if you go Plo Koon is cost 5. Han Solo costs 7, so there's no way you can ping plus ambush your Obi-Wan. He's gonna have to kill in 2 hits, which makes it a lot more difficult to manage, especially when you have ability to heal Obi-Wan. So the Sentinel is quite useful, but only deploy Obi-Wan when Quinlan is dead, because otherwise he has plenty of way to one-shot it. Then Emperor Palpatine, I think, is really good against Quinlan. I think, generally speaking, Palpatine is very strong against mid-range decks in general, like decks that are not fast enough to kill Palpatine before Palpatine gets deployed. And once Palpatine deploys, just takes over the game. So it is very difficult for mid-range deck to beat Palpatine in general. And I think this is also true with Quinlan. Also, the fact that you can draw a lot of cards using the Palpatine's ability. You can recycle a lot of like those very low health units. Also, Palpatine does not care too much about Tarkin Town early on in the game because he's mostly playing units that kind of like kill, that they die and then they leave a unit behind. So you don't really care too much about those units dying, especially if your opponent has to use his epic action to be able to do that. So that's pretty nice. So Palpatine, I think he has a good leader ability, and the fact that he does naturally very well into mid-range deck is a big threat. Another deck that I really like into Quinlan is Cad Bane. Cad Bane is known to be really good against other mid-range decks, especially mid-range that are like faster than him. So that's the case here, of course, of Quinlan. Generally speaking, as a general rule of thumb, when two mid-range decks fight against one another, the slower one usually wins, and Cad Bane is definitely the slower one of the two. It has the better late game. And another cool thing is that Cad Bane is very difficult. With his 8 health, it's not easy for Quinlan to get rid of him. So he's gonna stay alive. He cannot really be one-shotted, which is very nice. And Cad Bane is just a really good leader against those type of decks. And then finally, one that you might not think about, but I really enjoy into Quinlan is Boba Daimyo. So Boba Daimyo is very nice. So just like Obi-Wan, the fact he costs 6 and he's a 4/7 means that he cannot, if Quinlan is out of the way, if you manage to kill Quinlan, which you can do with your own Han Solo, because Boba Yellow also plays Han Solo, so you can actually Han Solo +1 attack can one-shot a Quinlan. So if you have Quinlan out of the way, it's not easy for Quinlan to one-shot Boba Fett because he's a 6 cost 7 health, so it's a little bit awkward. Boba Fett, at least the way I build it, is like slightly more slower than Quinlan, so you have a better late game, so you can afford to go pass. And it has a great way to deal with all the late game threats, and it also plays Boba Fett's armor, and if you manage to can put Boba Fett's armor on Boba Fett, and there's no upgrade removal, then Boba Fett is going to be very difficult to get rid of, which is very nice. So this is kind of like a cool little thing I like. So the 4 leaders that I like particularly into Quinlan. Okay, now let's talk about the yellow cards. What are the best yellow cards against Quinlan? So I'll start first with a classic of mine is Boba Fett. So Boba Fett is nice because 3/5 is a really good sideline against Quinlan. Doesn't die to ping plus Tarkin Town. It's also the double instance of damage means that it will one-shot Crafty Smugglers and R337 because it deals 3 damage first, removal of the shield, and 3 damage to unit kills it. It also one-shots most of the Quinlan units, which have 6 health, generally speaking, 5 health or 6 health. So once those units are, you can one-shot them with Boba Fett very easily. So basically, the fact that he can one-shot most of the units once they are exhausted, most of the units in the Quinlan deck, and it doesn't die to Ping plus Tarkin Town, I think makes it a really, really good choice into Quinlan, in my opinion. Then Surprise Strike. Surprise Strike is great against Quinlan because one of the inconvenience of Quinlan is that he's playing a 25 HP base. So basically buffs like Surprise Strike, finishers like Surprise Strikes are very, very effective whenever you're playing in a mirror of aggro. Having access to a Surprise Strike to finish the game is extremely useful against Quinlan. Quinlan is running 25 HP base and he's also doesn't have any way to heal. And that's the biggest weakness of the deck. So if you can kind of get a Surprise Strike in there, that increases your chance of winning by a lot. Surprise Strike is also very useful to be able to get rid of some of the bigger threats. You can one-shot like a Han Solo, you can one-shot a Quinlan with the Surprise Strike, so that's also very nice. Then we got L337. It's one of the very few 2-drops that doesn't die to Pling plus Tarkin Town. That's very useful, and icing on the cake, it also has Smuggle, which is obviously, we already know Smuggle cards are great against Quinlan because of the amount of hand disruption. So L337 is a great choice as well. Then we got Kira. I like Kira as well against Quinlan, especially if you are in initiative. Comes into play, you will block the big power plays, the Plo Koons, the enemy Kiras. You can really, really be very annoying. And the fact that 3/5s is not super easy to kill for Quinlan, especially if you're blocking the only card that can kill it, which is Plo Koon. So I like Akira into Quinlan. Then we got Millennium Falcon. This card is great because it's a smuggle card. It's one of the best smuggle cards in the game, so just for that reason. Same for Zoro's Bliss. Zoro's Bliss gets one-shotted by Plo Koon, so you have to be careful about this. But it's still like one of the best smuggle cards, and smuggle cards are really good against Quinlan. Then we got Enticing Reward, which is if you're playing a control deck that is based on yellow, Enticing Reward is one of your best cards because of the amount of card advantage that you produce. So it's really a really great card. And then finally, last but not least, Hotshot DR44 Blasters. Basically, Hotshot DR44 is... So I put it in a yellow card because, in my opinion, it is a yellow card. Out of this list of cards, it's the best card against Quinlan by a lot. It's basically the same as Surprise Strike, but on top of this, it does not get discarded. It's a card that you can smuggle, so it's never going to be discarded, and smuggle cards we know. So it's combining the best thing about Surprise Strike and the best thing about Millennium Falcon. So being a buff spells that comes out of nowhere that can be smuggled. So very good against hand disruption, and really good at finish off the game against 25 HP base, no way to heal. Blasters is really it is the best yellow card against Quinlan, in my opinion. It's also a cheap card that you can keep in your hand. They can discard from fourth row, but even that is not really the best way to use it, in my opinion. The best way is just to simply smuggle it. But what you can do is like you can keep it in your hand, and then when you think you can use it, then you can smuggle it whenever it's time to use it. Moving on to blue now. So blue, first of all, Lone Pike, very simple. It's just a very good, it's just a very good 4-drop, and it smuggles. It's one of the best smuggle cards available in blue black, so that's the basic reason. Then we got Avenger. Avenger is one of the best late game threats against Quinlan. Quinlan has no real way to deal with it once he comes into battlefield outside of just waylay to kind of no way to ambush it. So obviously whenever you're playing, Quinlan is a deck that can kill very quickly. So you might not have the opportunity to play the Avenger, but it's also not a very, very aggressive deck. So getting into 9 resources to drop a dude is not unrealistic at all in this matchup. Super Laser Blast. Super Laser Blast is simply just a great card against any mid-range decks. So Super Laser Blast is very strong. Don't rely on it too much because there's a high chance it's going to get discarded or blocked by Akira. But if you happen to top deck it, it's a great card. Chewbacca is another smuggle card that people don't talk enough about. That can be very useful, especially if you're playing a Han red, because then you can discount the price. What is great about it is that the one player ability will kill a wide amount of different units in the Quinlan deck. It's impossible to one-shot, and actually with 10 health, with a grit, if you try to one-shot it, try to deal a lot of damage to it, it's going to become an absolute monster, and obviously it is a smuggle card. So if you have, Quinlan has stripped you from your hand, Chewbacca is going to be a great tool to have. Red Squadron X-Wing is a great card because it draws you a card. Just be careful that to not play too like if your opponent does use Tarkin Town on it, it's actually fine because at least you draw a card. So if you're basically forcing Tarkin Town on something that is gonna draw you a card, that's actually a pretty good trade to have. So the fact that it deals damage to itself is not necessarily the end of the world. And once again, just the fact that you draw a card is the important bit here. Then we got the client. So the client is very resilient to ping and Tarkin Town because he's shielded and has a high health. And the bounty is also very useful because obviously Quinlan is quite an aggressive deck. So I really like the client. And then we got Redemption. I should have probably put into that list Yoda as well. I think Yoda is another great card against Quinlan because of the card draw. So forgot to put that. I should have put that on the list as well. But then finally I wanted to finish with Redemption. Redemption, it's just amazing against Quinlan. There's no real way for him to kill it. I mean, I guess he could have like red 5, and then just attack and kill it. But this, you already know it's on the battlefield, so it's not really that big of a deal. And if you have red 5, you can just like not lose too many HP. But the fact that it can heal and block the space arena saves you against, gives you like a life warranty against a Falcon that comes out of nowhere. Heals you a bunch, and there's no real answer for it. Like you can wail it, and you play it back to heal a bunch again. So it's just really, really, really solid. And once again, because Quinlan is a relatively slow deck, getting into 8 resources is not that difficult whenever you're playing as a control player. Before we get into the next color, I just want to let you know that we've opened our store for Team Enigma. So if you want to support the channel, buying product from this store is kind of the best way to support us, to be fair. So thank you so much for supporting us. Moving on to the green color. So in the green color, we have Darth Vader. So Darth Vader is really good against Quinlan because of the card advantage that he provides. Whenever you have empty-handed, being able to give yourself a big 7-drop and an additional body is really, really useful. 5 attack will kill most of the stuffs, and then Vader is probably going to die back to like a Plo Koon or a hand, but it's not really that big of a deal because you already pull out a unit, you already ambush and kill something. And that's what makes Vader so good, is the fact that he just provides so much value when it comes to play. If he dies afterward, it's not a big deal, and if he doesn't die, then he's great. So Vader is just really a solid card in this kind of fair matchup. He's just generally very good. Scanning Officer is also surprisingly good in this matchup. Quinlan plays quite a few smuggle cards. He's playing, of course, the blasters. He plays the Cassian. He plays the L337. So your chance to be able to hit something with Scanning Officer is actually quite good. Scanning Officer is one of those 2-drops that if you play on turn 1, if people don't expect it, they will usually, of course, on turn 1, put a couple of smuggle cards at their first play, and then you will play the Scanning Officer first, show one of the card might be a smuggle card, and then you basically exhaust it, and now you can't play any 2-drops, meaning you can't play 2-drops to kill the Scanning Officer, and suddenly you are so far ahead. Because the only way you can kill the Scanning Officer on the turn after is to play a 2-drops on turn 2, which is not ideal, and then use Tarkin Town, and the Scanning Officer could even attack, and it's really, really annoying. So Scanning Officer tapping resource is one of the best opening you can do against Quinlan if you have the initiative, which you will have most of the time when you play Quinlan, because even if Quinlan gets the die roll, he's still going to give you the initiative, so you can ping whatever comes out of your end. But if you won't be able to do this if you tap down his resources with Scanning Officer. Obviously, this relies a little bit of luck, because there needs to be a smuggle card there on turn 1, but it's something that is actually quite reliable. And even later on in the game, this card can be really good. So it's just a really solid card. Darth Maul is also really nice. It kills everything in Quinlan, that's a big deal. It one-shots Quinlan, which is huge. It can allow you to race, and it's just a really good card. It will die on the way back, of course, to a Plo Koon or a Han, as I said earlier. But once again, just like Vader, it just provides so much value as it comes out that it's not really that big of a deal. Then we got Home 1. I really like Home 1 into Quinlan because it's for the same reason as I like Avenger. It's a large unit that Quinlan will not be able to kill, that will restore you, that will provide you with immediate value. So even if it gets bounced, it's not really that big of a deal. So all those kind of very large units are really nice, and you've been able to bring back something into play that will be impactful, that will protect you, and that's really nice. Resupply, Quinlan has no really much play into ramp, unless he plays Sham Syndulla in the sideboard. But most, I've seen a lot of Quinlan deck that don't run Sham Syndulla, so basically ramping against Quinlan is very good. Basically, generally speaking, the ramp gameplay is very strong in mid-range. Ramp is really at its best against mid-range in general. So, super designation for the exact same reason. Reinforcement Walker for the same reason as Home 1, and just a card that provides value. The fact that it either provides, if you Quinlan went for the aggressive plan, the healing becomes really nice, and if you went for the disruption, the hand disruption plan, then the card draw is very nice. So either way, Reinforcement Walker is never a bad card. The fact that there's 9 health means that he basically doesn't get killed by anything, at least in one shot. And it also has 6 attack, meaning that he can kill anything whenever he attacks. So this is a really, really good start line to have against Quinlan. Then we got Palpatine's Return. I really like Palp's Return because obviously between the Ahsoka and the your opponent will often, and the 4th row will discard your expensive 4th unit. You can actually literally just voluntarily discard a Vader, or even better, like a Palpatine or a Snoke, and now you can play Palpatine's Return, and that allows you to play that Vader, or that Maul, or this Palpatine like 1 turn or 2 turns earlier. And we know that Darth Vader's Maul are both really good cards against Quinlan. So Palpatine Return, you can actually use the weapon of your opponent against him, and basically take advantage of the fact that he's going to discard to you a big card, and you can kind of bring it back into play with a discount, which is very nice. I also really like Admiral Yularen. The +1 health bonus is so valuable against Quinlan. It can mess up really, really hard with the math of the different ambush cards. Certain units that would get one shot by certain things don't get one shot anymore, and that can be very nice. So it really messes up with the math. And because Quinlan is a deck is very, very focused on, it's a very damage based removal that he plays. Being able to get a +1 health bonus whenever you're playing against damage based removal is very useful. There's so many good cards in green against Quinlan. I had to put a second page of it here. We got blue leaders. Blue leader is great against Quinlan because it can ambush pretty much all the turn 1 plays in space, whether it's the A-wings, sometimes some people play the Y-wings as well, or even the Anakin. Like there's tons of like 2-drops that the Quinlan players tends to play. Blue leaders can ambush them and kill them. And then later on the game, it can also be played for 5, and in which case it will ambush Ahsoka, it will ambush Kira, it will ambush Cassian, all the 3/5s, and stay alive, which is a pretty big deal. So I really like Blue Leader for those reasons. Then I like Prepare to Take Off. If you're playing a vehicle-based deck, once again, it's really, really good card draw. If you're playing like a Piet deck, turn 1, Prepare to Take Off, draw 2 cards. It's going to make all the hand disruption a lot worse. So I really like it. And then I also like U-Wing Reinforcement. Because it's a card that obviously it can get discarded, but it nevertheless, if you can get to that point, it's once again a huge amount of card advantage that you're providing here with your reinforcement with immediate impact on the game. So that's really nice. Okay, going on now into red. So if you go into red, card that I like is Wrecker. Of course, Wrecker ECL. The 5 damage from the when play ability will kill Ahsoka, Kira, Cassian, the list goes on, all the 3/5s basically, and then the Overwhelm Ambush will allow you to one-shot anything in Quinlan, including the leader himself. So that's very, very nice. Even without ECL, I still think Wrecker is really, really good against Quinlan. So Wrecker is really a great weapon. Is one of the best weapons the Sabine decks have against Quinlan, in my opinion. Then we got Stella Guerrera. Stella Guerrera is simply the queen of card advantage. Especially if you're playing it into an Anakin deck that has 35 HP. You don't care too much about taking damage, and the card advantage that you're going to get, all the extra removal you're going to get, especially the cards like Fel the Dragon to deal with, or Takedown is one of the best removal against Quinlan. It's going to be very useful, so the card advantage is just really, really nice. And even like getting like a Daring Raid that is going to be like a cheap removal that you can discard off 4th throw is very nice. So card advantage is just really good against Quinlan, and Stella Guerrera provide this very well, very well. Krayt Dragon, for the same reason as the other like late game threats, there's no real way for Quinlans to deal with the Krayt Dragon when it comes out, and because it's a mid-range deck, getting to Night Resources is not that difficult for a control deck. So I really like Krayt Dragon as a late game finisher against Quinlan. Cassian is great against Quinlan because it's one of the best small gold cards in the game. It might actually be one of the... Yeah, maybe after DL44 Blaster, it might be one of the best small gold cards in the game. So small gold cards are great against Quinlan, and Cassian is no exception. Another one, Kylo TIE Silencer is interesting against Quinlan because it's... first of all, it trades very well into A-Wing and Y-Wings, which are like the 2 most popular turn 2 play in space that Quinlan's going to do. Most likely he's going to go pink plus Tarkin Talent though, but if he's not able to do that, then TIE Silencer will trade very well into those guys, which is nice. But another cool thing about Kylo TIE Silencer is like, if it gets discarded from an Ahsoka or from a 4th throw, you can actually play him for 2 resources. So it's actually a nice little counters to hand discard. Then we got 4 Cause I Believe In. The 4 Cause I Believe In is great because Quinlan is a deck that runs 25 HP base and doesn't have any way to heal. So direct damage against that deck. It's a deck that is really, really good at controlling the board, at killing enemy units, but it's not good at avoiding direct damage to base. So whenever you are playing Sabine and you're not able to deal damage to Quinlan anymore because he took over the game, multiple 4 Cause I Believe In will get you there. I also really like Ruthless Raiders. It's also direct damage. no ways for the Quinlan to really kill them outside of of just the waylay. And so yeah, difficult to kill, immediate impact on the game, and direct damage, which is great against Quinlan. So that's a good package. I just wanted to let you know that you can pick up Crate Dragon for 18.5 euro on card market. For me, it's a card that is going to be really popular in this new meta, so you need to kind of have your eyes on it. I also just wanted to talk about a few good cards that we can find in heroism, in mono heroism and mono villainy. So one of the cards I found to be really good against Quinlan is I Am Your Father. I love this card in a control deck because both aspects are equally super annoying for Quinlan to deal with. So drawing 3 cards against Quinlan is insane. It's insane because you're basically once you draw 3 cards. 3 cards for 3 is an insane rate. And once you draw 3 cards, the hand disruption from Quinlan becomes effectively a non-factor, which is a huge deal for a control deck, because if you're playing a control deck, the hand disruption is by far the most annoying thing to deal with. And if you can draw 3 cards early on in the game like this, it's a great deal. So most likely, the opponent is always going to use the 7 damage. But then, I Am Your Father becomes an insanely good, efficient removal, because 7 damage will kill absolutely everything in Quinlan for only 3 resources, and on top of this, it also kills the leader as well. So it's either an insanely efficient removal or a way to draw 3 cards, which either way is going to be really, really good for you. So I'm Your Father is, in my opinion, one of the greatest card, one of the really, really good sideboard card against Quinlan if you're playing a control deck. Next we got Tech. Well, Tech, we said that smuggle cards are really good against Quinlan, so obviously Tech is one of the greatest smuggle cards in the game, and it gives all of the other cards smuggles. So a deck that is not dealt with can be very, very problematic for a Quinlan deck. And then finally, I wanted to talk about Shuttle ST49, specifically, of course, in Gar Saxon, even though Shuttle can be played in other decks. The fact that the units is 4 health and shielded makes it very annoying to deal with for Quinlan, because he has to ping, and then he has to ping in again if you want to go ping plus attack in town, so very difficult to annoying. And then the win playability sometimes can steal a shield, and Quinlan plays quite a few. He plays the Crafty Smugglers and R337, sometimes both. So if you can steal a shield from your opponent and put it on one of your own units, that is an insanely powerful play. And yeah, now you have a double shielded Shuttle SS49. Very difficult to deal with. So that's really, really good card, especially if you're playing Gal Saxon. Just a great, great card against Quinlan. And that's it. That's basically the end of my video. So my take on Quinlan is like, I think that a lot of people just assume that Quinlan is going to be the best deck because it was the second best deck into the Django meta. But now that people are going to be focusing on countering Django, on countering Quinlan, I don't think Quinlan is going to be nearly as good. As I said many times in the video, Quinlan is a great deck, but it's never been a deck that has been the target of the meta. It's always been like the second or third most powerful deck in the meta. During the set 3 meta, it was basically the 4th best deck, and in this meta, it was the 2nd best deck, and Django was so insanely ahead that everybody was focusing against Django. So it's a deck that has attracted no attention so far, but now for the very first time, people are going to be starting focusing in because a lot of people consider it to be the best deck in the game right now. And as I said earlier, I think that as soon as people are going to be starting targeting it, it's going to be a very different story, and I don't think this deck is going to be performing nearly as well as you might think. So personally, I don't think Quinlan is going to be... I think it's going to be a good deck, but I don't think it's going to be nearly as dominant as anything we've seen before, whether you compare to Han Yellow. I don't think it's going to be as dominant as Han Yellow was in set 3. I don't think it's going to be as dominant as Django was, and I don't think it's going to be as dominant as Boba. So it's going to be one of... I wouldn't be surprised if Quinlan is not even on the top 3 most popular deck in the meta. So don't focus too much on it. Don't overside against it. Don't overtake against it. Just watch this video and you will know a lot of things that you need to know. You will know what are the good cards, and you'll be able to have it in mind whenever you build your deck and train in preparation to the upcoming regional qualifiers in Richmond that we're going to see. Very excited about this and looking forward to see how it's going to shake up. Thank you so much for following that video. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe, and consider buying some of our merch on our Enigma store. The link is on the description below, and I'll see you next time.